What is up, y'all? It is your girl, Scardi B, and we are here with a very incredible special interview. If you have listened to any fucking episode of this podcast, you've heard this name, and we have him here in the flesh, I mean virtual flesh, which is a really good punk band name. I'm writing that one down. But we are here with James Montgomery. James, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, we've already been like chopping it up for the last few minutes, and I was like, I gotta hit record because it's getting too good. It's getting too good. James, tell us who you are, what you do, and then I'll gas you up further.
Okay, so hello. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be on these things. But hey, I'm James Montgomery. You might remember me from the decade I spent covering Fall Out Boy and Fall Out Boy adjacent bands at MTV News. I was a writer for Rolling Stone. And now I do tech stuff, so Snapchat, Amazon, stuff like that. But yeah, a veteran from back in the days.
I mean, I can tell, like, it's like war flashbacks in your eyes for something that we were coming up with.
You could tell because I look pretty old now, but that's okay.
Oh my God. I think growing old is a privilege. I think every time I see these bands like get grayer and like fully form into like these, like I'm like, holy shit, like, thank God they made it. Because we all know that like when Pete turned 28, like there was a party, like some type of celebration, like y'all, we fucking made it. So growing old is a privilege. And it's a privilege to like be here and be again, able to talk about the impact specifically that your writing had on like the community and following. Cause it was a lot of it was a special blend of Pete was like a press machine. And he wanted to document, I mean, so much to the fact that he made Friends or Enemies to be kind of like his own take on social media, like a place where he can vlog. And that was the birth of Cobra Cam, TAI TV, and like, oh yeah, baby. Oh, I'm going there. That was my MTV. I mean, also MTV, but that was my MTV.
Well, MTV wasn't really MTV at that point. And that's kind of like, because I started at MTV in 2004. So basically, like, I was doing freelance writing. I was writing for Spin magazine back in the day. I was doing a day job and then writing for Spin at night. And they pitched me a couple of these like bands to watch features, and one of them was Fall Out Boy. So I did an interview at my desk at TV Guide for Spin magazine on the phone with Pete.
TV Guide, wow.
Oh man,
okay, yeah,
still a magazine, inexplicably still a magazine. But yeah. So, we hit it off, and he was just like a great dude to talk to and really open. And then I think maybe like as soon as that issue had hit stands, I got hired at MTV News. And so I basically did the same exact interview with him at MTV News. And that really kicked off this, friendship and just relationship that we have, and really opened the door to a scene, a ton of bands, a ton of producers, a ton of artists, and honestly, just connections with so many fans, just that I met, like we were talking off camera about some people that we know from, back in the day and stuff. So
shout out Allie, let's go.
Dude, name tags. There we go.
Know the vibes.
Honestly,
I mean, we're going to get to the South by experience. Don't worry. We're going to get there.
But it's a wild ride, and it's just great to kind of like now look back on a little bit, because like we were saying before we started, there's a lot of this stuff that I'm like, wow, first of all, one, I got paid to cover some like really dumb shit. And then two, like, I don't remember doing this. So it's beneficial for me as well to kind of look back on these things.
I think everybody was kind of like in like a little haze back then. So, I mean, more importantly now, but like, I think that I also forgot. And then the hyperfixation and the research that this podcast takes you in, I go deep. I go like the Google like search, like I'm on like the 16th O, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
like I'm looking for specifically like live journals and like blog pieces that have been archived, because that's like the real, so for
fire
example,
up the Wayback Machine. Yeah. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Me and Wayback Machine, I'm probably on some like NSA list somewhere, because it's like, what is she looking for? Specifically on like the 2007 Fall Out Boy website, when it used to be Fall Out Boy Rock and had like Franklin in the front. Like I was like, y'all weren't fucking there, and it's okay, because I'm gonna take you there. I was a boardie, so I was very active on the message board. But what's so exciting is that these people that are in the message boards and were these big fans are now people working in the music industry, people making decisions. And it's like, I know that there's an executive out there somewhere who's going to have like a Panic at the Disco tattoo or like a One Direction tattoo. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you've seen fandom develop from what it was to what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head. And I think what's kind of amazing is you look at a band like Fall Out Boy, who, really came up in this scene, and a scene that formed in a lot of ways so quickly and so globally, but just the fact that it was born kind of a new medium. This is kind of the first era where there were message boards and, social media, as it were. And so the interesting thing about them is like, that was now 20 years ago. So
yeah.
Fall Out Boy goes on tour now, and they've become this kind of band where there's sort of two generations of fans, which is amazing.
Yeah, fans with their kids always gets me.
But most bands don't get to have that sort of career. So that in and of itself is amazing. But just all the kids, and it was like cities, big and small, all around the world, because I covered Fall Out Boy a lot, and they did a lot of stuff. So,
yeah.
But talking to all these kids, I was always struck by just how, their passion, their connection, but also their creativity. And I think they really came of age in a time where you could harness these sort of tools, digital tools, to, promote yourself, make your own stuff, get your stuff out there. And I think that's only really kind of laid the seeds. I mean, I think that another thing is like a guy, I went to school in University of Florida in Gainesville, and that's where Fueled by Ramen started. And so I actually used to work at a newspaper right across the street from the Fueled by Ramen office. So guys like John Janik, who grew up in that thing and is now like the head of Universal Music, one of the huge record labels, a guy who came up in that scene, was sort of born of these sort of ethics and things like that, and applied those to this global conglomerate with a ton of success. So it's a real testament to just everything I said, the passion. It's great to have people in music who care about music and care about artists and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, it's really been, we're still seeing it today in terms of bands and just, connections and just what people put out there. It's still really creative and amazing too. So I was always struck by that right from the jump. And I was a bit older and I came in there, and I'm kind of like an indie rock dude. And I still am sort of an indie rock guy. So a lot of the stuff, I'd kind of look at these artists and the scenes and be like, oh, I don't know. But just getting in there and spending time, it really changed my opinion about so many things. So yeah, it was really amazing.
And especially the take on women. I feel like as we were labeled fangirls, and we were, but these fangirls were some of the most influential voices in promoting these bands and making sure that people were hearing about them because they were constantly posting about them, and probably the people who started the most fan pages in a time where it was important to have that icon that had your favorite band and have it as your MySpace song and your statuses. And I think about that where it's the fangirl becoming the ultimate promoter, and where they are now. I now work in the music industry, but I was definitely one of them, labeled as something that was bad when really we created so much traction for a lot of these guys to build. So I think about that often, and we talked a bit about being the consumer, right? Understanding what we're actually learning about and intaking, but we talked a little bit also about Pete was a press machine, right? He was very, very ready to be open and honest and authentic and be proactive about that in a time where press was oh no, don't talk to me, but also here's all my information. How did that change your perspective on bands that do that versus don't do that versus caught up with that press was important versus kind of stayed stagnant?
Yeah, well, I will say, above all else, it made my job incredibly easy because we were being told, this was you had to write 5 stories a day every day. And it was right when they were starting to put page views on things. So you could see the content machine was starting to fire up. But it was amazing to cover, Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco, because literally anything would happen in the world. And you could fire off an email to Pete or, Brendan Urie, and they would be like, here's 5 paragraphs. And so you're like, all right, that's a couple stories there. But it's interesting because, again, it was this time where, how artists connected with fans was fundamentally changing. And even, early days of MTV, when I was there, if you wanted to talk to someone, there was some breaking news, something was happening, you had to go through their publicist. Their publicists go to the management, go to the artist. And so it's you're spending a half a day minimum waiting to hear back from us. And so these artists were able to cut out a lot of those middlemen, which really made the publicists kind of pissed off because they'd be like, what the hell is this? But in another way, I guess I didn't see it coming, but it also kind of really cut out a lot of the music journalists because you eventually got to this point where you didn't need an MTV News to tell you what your artists were doing or thinking because the artists could tell you themselves. And so Pete was a real early adapter of that. And I think he really got the game, knew how to play the game. And it's someone who came up, in the 90s, artists, bands, they didn't want, press was sort of seen as this bad thing to do, and promotion was sort of like gauche, and you didn't do any of these things. And
it was cringe, yeah.
Yeah. And so to see that really change for a myriad of reasons, the technology, but also because a lot of these artists, maybe not Fall Out Boy's level, but below, weren't getting a ton of help from the labels. And so they almost had to take it upon themselves to do that. But, it worked out great for the fans, great for me at the time. I think now, 20 years on, we're sort of looking at the media landscape, and it's kind of like, but it's just how things progress. And so I was right there on the kind of crest of the wave, and it really helped me just sort of connect with these bands, connect with fans, and also meet my daily quota of stories, because
100%.
Pete was a machine. Yeah, for sure.
100% like a PR machine, and either a PR nightmare or dream. Just someone who is able and willing and wanting to talk. Honestly, probably had most of those answers canned up and ready because he's drafted it 13 times.
Right.
Talk to me a bit about, I would like to hear a little bit more about like stories that you do remember that were kind of like, I'm really proud of these, or this was information that's like really funny, or like looking back, I'm like, oh my God, as well as some of them that didn't make the cut. Cause it's like, we're writing a ton and like, maybe not everything's A+. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think to go back to what you said a few minutes ago about like fangirls and the idea of women in this sort of genre, one of the things that I actually was most kind of proud about writing was like the whole Laura Jane Grace story with Against Me, where she was transitioning, and especially at a time in a genre of music, punk, where it was still it still is probably but a boys' club, and there's a ton of misogynism and transphobia, and so getting to speak with her about that and really write about that on a national kind of platform was really gratifying and really amazing. And just the stuff I heard from kids going through similar things was really just great, and still stands out as one of the things that I will always remember. But just I think there was a lot of stuff that I would write that sometimes I didn't go through the publicist, or the publicist would get really mad about it, that would get pulled because it was always like right around the VMAs. And so they'd be like, so-and-so is not going to perform at the VMAs. So not Fall Out Boy specific, but I was obviously big on My Chemical Romance. They were another one of the bands that I had to report on all the time.
Stand up, like,
and a great band. I dig My Chem a lot, but this was like right when they were going in to do the album that was going to be Black Parade, and so it was like total secrecy. And so I ended up somehow getting an email address of the guy who's producing the record, it's not Neil, his name totally escaped me, but whoever the producer of that record was. And I was emailing with him, and then I got on the phone with him, and he told me all this shit about the album that would become the Black Parade. He was like, this album is going to be called The Rise and Fall of My Chemical Romance. Here's all the stuff they're doing. So I wrote this story that was all about that. And like, it turns out it wasn't called that, but we didn't know that for years. But anyway, so I broke all this news about it. And this was right when they were getting ready to premiere Black Parade at the VMA pre-show, or the VMAs, when they were like on top of Rockefeller Center, and it was like this crazy thing. And so my managing editor went to the higher ups and was like, this is a solidly reported story. It's sourced, we stand by this story. And the heads of MTV were like, yeah, but we're trying to get them to do the VMAs. So it's like, cut the story. So the story like disappeared entirely.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I just think there was also a lot of stuff too with, Pete, when he and Ashley Simpson were pregnant, and I think that they were having Bronx was when the kid was born. So there was all these rumors out there about it, that them being pregnant, and so I actually hit up Pete to get the official word, and he straight up told me, he's like, she's not pregnant. So I was like, okay. So I wrote the story that got picked up in tons of places, and then it turns out that he was like, just kidding, dude, she is pregnant. We didn't want to say anything yet. So he kind of hung me out to dry in that instance, but I was like, hey,
But you and the entirety of the Fall Out Boy fandom, because after the dark times, when they returned February 3rd, he was like, rumors are not true.
Right.
And then February 4th, there's like, we're back, bitches. And there's like this meme on TikTok where it's like Pete just turns and it's like, this man just lied to you. And that's been the entirety of what it's like to be a Pete Wentz fan. Like, I'm like, I believe everything and nothing, and I also don't ask for explanation. So but as a journalist, to the madness. Yeah.
Right. As a journalist, that's kind of dicey ground, because you're like, all right, he said it, I'm going to go with this. It's like, all right. But yeah, I mean, it was basically a lot of stuff whenever kind of like the day-to-day reporting would kind of run into the I suppose, like corporate overlords. There was a thing that I actually wrote too that got pulled kind of famously. It was like I used to do a weekly column that was called
Mm-hmm.
Bigger Than the Sound, and one of them was about kind of upcoming albums that were definitely going to suck, which is like also like what like kind of a pissy thing to write
It
about.
was the aughts.
Right.
Like hate was the language.
Yeah. So I wrote about how Panic at the Disco was in there too, and it ended up being that album that was pretty odd, which actually I think is actually really a great album. But it was basically like I wrote about 50 Cent's new album and how it was definitely going to suck, and then the story went live, and then like 2 hours later, I get called in my managing editor's office, and he's like, "Hey, so 50 Cent is in the building, and he really wants to talk to you about the story." And I was like, "Oh shit!" And they're like, so they were like, "We're not going to let him up here." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But the story ended up getting pulled because 50 was upset that I said his album was going to suck. But I mean, like in hindsight, I probably would have pulled it. I would have been pissed too. But yeah, there was a lot of.
I mean, that's
like,
street rules. Like these are not little
yeah.
indie bros. Like Curtis will
Look
fuck
at me.
you up. Like he will not be 50. He will be Curtis. He'll give you his ID and then fuck you up. Like
right. What was the thing without like the Randall Emmett or whatever? That dirtbag guy who was married to someone on Vanderpump Rules, and he owed 50 Cent money, and 50 was like, money by tomorrow, Emmett, or something like that. And just like terrified of this dude. 50 is incredible. Like it's Curtis 50 social media version. Next level. So
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But like we'll also and what's the difference, because you were talking a lot about these rock bands, but it's like these hip hop figures like at that time, like probably now still will come and like actually pull up. Like I think that's the biggest. I think it's so fucking punk where it's like, yo, it's not just like music, like this is actually my life, and like there's fucking like hood and street rules to it. What was it like, being able to talk about the merging of those two worlds in Fall Out Boy's music at that time, and just kind of trying to be as civil and factual as possible?
Well, I think that it was really interesting, first of all, because, again, the way this band was formed and the dudes in Fall Out Boy, you can tell they grew up in an era where so much music was so available to you so easily. And so you could see the influences of hip hop and R&B. And then obviously, like with like Joe and Andy, you had a lot more of the kind of like, hardcore punk, stuff like that. But there was a lot of stuff that, kind of seeped into their music, where they would go, subsequent albums, but just what they were influenced by, and that sort of ethos. And like, there was, I met Lil Wayne through Pete Wentz. I was in the room with Kanye. I never actually talked to Kanye, but like I met Babyface, like who was hanging out with them, like, Tyga, all these guys, stuff like Travie McCoy, just a lot of hip hop artists that they really kind of brought into the fold that they were influenced by. You could tell, they would put them on records and stuff like that. But like, I always just kind of, in a way, it really made sense because the two kind of genres, speaking broadly, there's a lot of similarities in terms of like the drive, the output, the artistry, those sort of things, where it was like you had to really get out there, not to use the term bootstrapped, but really like bootstrap yourself up, because at the time they're, it's not like, hip hop is now where people are suddenly like, wait a minute, it's the greatest form of art America's produced in the 20th century. It was sort of still at the time kind of seen as kind of a marginal thing. And so, which is not to say that Fall Out Boy, helped elevate these artists, but they were at least willing, to share the stage with them and, put them on records, stuff like that. Like,
with 50 Cent when they took him on tour and
everything
in between. I mean, let me not even get started with like the comments that I read about that and just the severe, weird racism that was like felt by that. Cause it's like, I feel like people like me were reading that and being like, like, am I welcome here? Like, are my friends welcome here? And I think that was really tough. But going back to talking about like kind of who they surrounded themselves with, I say that Pete wanted to be a rapper so fucking bad.
Yeah,
like
I'm sure.
Like there's no way that Decay Dance wasn't like his Young Money and like being able to sign these rappers and like be a part of that, have a clothing line. I literally just got my Clandestine Industries wallet. I bid on it. I won. So I'm just starting to like slowly collect everything, just be like healing inner child shit. Through Clandestine Industries.
No, you're absolutely right there too. And I know that like Pete, particularly this era, was obsessed with Young Money, with and just sort of Baby and Lil Wayne and that whole thing. And I think you're right on. I think that was really the kind of like model he saw and wanted to emulate. Like, when I did FNM TV, which was a show with Pete, and like that's how he.
I mean, your LinkedIn. Don't let me dox you, but your
yeah.
LinkedIn has a picture of like you and Diddy, I believe.
Well, that was when like they put me on there, and they're like, your job is to critique the music videos. And I was like, okay. So the first couple episodes, I would be like, this video stinks, or like, this is terrible. And so Diddy was on there with this dude named Donnie Klang, who was like his like white R&B handsome hunk guy. Yeah. And they showed the video, and I kind of came back after the video. I was like, I don't think this dude's going to make it. Which I'm like, I was like, how did they put that on there? But Diddy was there, and he like got real upset, and so he was like on camera, just like comes up and he's like, "Who are you? You're a hater." Blah blah. He's like yelling at me. And it was like me and like
we'll pull the fuck up, like hung out with Biggie, like we'll fuck you up.
But I was like, oh my god! And then the next week he came and brought me flowers to apologize, which was very nice. So that was the photo is him apologizing to me. But
that's very funny. The context is even funnier.
I know. I got a public apology from Diddy. How many people can say that? But I think the thing is, so at FNM TV, I'd fly from New York to LA for basically like the weekend. I'd spend a lot of time with Pete, his family. I basically would hang out in his like pool house in his cabana because I was really, really, really close with his former tour manager, a guy named Dan Su, who was also going as Korean Tom Cruise back then.
As a meet and greet person who did all those. Very, very familiar.
Right.
That Dirty. Let's give it up for Dirty, wherever Dirty is right now. Another Florida boy. Yeah. We love Dirty. I think about Dirty at least once a week. At least once a week, and like in their new album, they say, "Love my life, I love my life," and I'm like, that's a Dirty reference, right? Like if you fucking know, like I love my life, like, and every single he was the original like air horn for Fall Out Boy.
Yeah, he was kind of like their default hype man and / guy who would do dumb shit on stage all the time and stuff like that. But like all those dudes were hanging out, but like we would hang out in Pete's pool house, me, Dan, Pete, get up to some bad things and just constantly play Lil Wayne mixtape. So it's like The Drought and like, and I think maybe the Carter 3 was coming out then, but all this stuff and just nonstop stuff like that. So long way to tuck the original point. Yes, I definitely think Pete unquestionably really admired those artists, admired everything about them, and really wanted to kind of formulate his band like that. And honestly, like, I think as you could tell, an interesting thing about Fall Out Boy is just how their albums, how they've evolved as a band, how their albums are very different, but you can really tell sort of who's driving the album based on kind of like how it sounds and things like that. There's definitely some albums you can tell that Pete was really behind the wheel, and then there's some you can tell where he kind of laid back a little bit. But yeah, the hip hop influence in that band is super interesting and just kind of really influential, and also showed that you could do rock and hip hop in a way that wasn't like fucking like Limp Bizkit or new, that kind of stuff. But and also sound very of the time and very contemporary, and like doing these like mixed, like they did like this, like a Kanye jumped on their song, and it's like stuff like that is just
Have you heard the mashup mixtape that came out?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And honestly, like I heard it because you hit me up, and I was like, I should listen to this. And honestly, one thing I was like, wow, I remembered this instantly, but also I was like, I totally forgot about so much of this stuff at the time. And there was stuff where I didn't know if it was ever going to happen. Cause like another thing about Fall Out Boy is they would be like, we're doing 10 projects, and then like 9.5 of them would like never amount to anything. And so, but yeah, just like, it's also really interesting to be at a time where it was like, Kanye was around a lot, Lil Wayne and stuff like that. And their ascendants sort of like, they weren't who they were now, and so to be there and kind of witness them do in their early-ish stages was really interesting. And like, honestly, to this day, VMA wise, like it's turned out to be kind of this sort of like touchstone cultural moment, whatever, but like
the VMA suite,
well, not even the VMA suite, which was awesome, but I'm talking specifically about like when Kanye got on stage when Taylor won the award and he went off on her, and all that shit, and how it Taylor, she's eternally the victim, she could always be the martyr, whatever. But the thing about that was amazing is like, so I was covering that for MTV. So I was like the in-house reporter because I knew Fall Out Boy and a lot of the artists. And so before the show started, Pete and the guys were sitting in their seats in Radio City Music Hall, and Pete's like, come here. I go over there. He's like, dude, he's like, Kanye is hammered right now. He's like, he has this bottle of Hennessy. He made me take a pull off of it. He's shit-faced. I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, file that away for later. And then like, there's all these amazing photos of Kanye with like a bottle of Hennessy, and he's just like grabbing like Amber Rose and just like shit-faced. So yeah, I was like, oh, something might happen. And it turns out a lot of shit happened with Kanye that night. But it was basically because, in part, he was like just hammering the Henny all night. But yeah, so it was a nice entrance into that whole world and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the authenticity, honestly, about just being fucking human, and it's like you love it or hate it, because that's the attitude. It's the attitude with punk bands. It's the attitude with rappers. That's why I was like, they are one in one. Now, I agree. James, talk to me a little bit about the transition between writing to on camera, because that's a big transition, and like how it changed like what you communicated, how you communicated, now that you have to do it almost live.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, I was like, I didn't want to do this. Like, they were kind of, I was
You did great, dude. I mean, I discovered Chromeo through FNMTV. I remember the second I heard Mama's Boy, and Pete was like, this is the song of the century. That's this right here. Like, it might as well have been like fucking like a new Jay-Z song dropper. He was like, this is it right here. Like, and I was like, you're right.
I know they also, I mean, I remember they had like a band I still like, No Age was on there, like a sub pop band that had this wild music. They really introduced some stuff like that. But no, so a lot of it was just because I just wanted to, I was a rock journalist. I grew up, reading rock journalism. That's what I wanted to do. But, I guess I had a pretty good rapport with a lot of these artists who were also really big at the time. So, again, my relationship with Fall Out Boy and those sort of bands kind of pulled me into this era where they were like, you do these really great interviews. Why don't we start doing some of these on air? And I was like, okay. So we would do, at first it was like 10 minutes at the top, at 9:50 p.m. or 8:50 p.m. And it's like, oh, the rest of this interview is on mtvnews.com, but it'd be like a band would have, a new video or something coming out. So I started doing these really long interviews, and they, again, then they were like, well, you could do this. So you could definitely do red carpet stuff. So then I was doing all the award shows, like on the VMA, like talking to Gaga and like Jared Leto and all these people, and just, that was really the way in. But the first like real gig I had doing that was FNMTV, which was entirely because of Pete. Like Pete mandated, he obviously never told me this, but I was smart enough to put two and two together. I was like, oh, this is definitely because Pete wanted me on this show. So he really kind of lifted me up there and kind of gave me this spotlight. And then it was just this like crazy world that I had no idea about, but it was fascinating to be on camera, where they're like, hey, so you had to do this thing. Would you like a brand new suit? I'm like, absolutely. I would like a new suit. So, I mean, there are probably still some like clothes that I got from MTV in like 2010 or 11 that I still have. So
what James is trying to tell everybody is that the body is snatched. It hasn't moved.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Everything's still right in the same place. But I mean, I don't say I can still wear the clothes well, but I still have the clothes, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, and just, it really was just crazy. And just stuff like being able to, we did an on-camera interview live that went to the website .com with Laura Jane Grace. It was her first on-camera interview. And again, to go back to that, it's like a lot of it was kind of stupid bullshit. Like here, here's the Nokia.
Surface.
There was some opportunity to do some good work. Like I remember also one year at the VMAs during the red carpet, the pre-show, it was when Pussy Riot was really, they were being jailed, and sort of there's this big thing, but they kind of did this appeal to Green Day. And so live on the VMA red carpet, I got to talk to Green Day about Pussy Riot, and then also like say pussy like a million times, like live on TV. I was like,
there's a pussy counter on like
so
the side of the screen.
Ding, 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 ding. So it was great to do stuff like that. It was also really amazing to really see, the kind of the way that there are guys like Sway. Sway is amazing, a great dude, like just still one of the best dudes. But the way a guy like that, an established guy, or John Norris was another really, great person. The way to see how these straight up pros were able to be live on air for minutes, and like a minute live on air feels like an eternity,
a long time.
And so they would, as you host stuff, you're just like you get up there and you're like, so to
time
watch
is different. Yeah,
it really is. And the worst thing is you see a producer behind the camera being like stretch, you're like, oh god. But to see the way they were able to handle that, and just the ease, and then also just the way they kind of took me under their wing, even though they didn't have to, and like Sway's just like an amazing Sways. I have great great John Norris stories that like, John, he was really into the scene too for a while there. He really was feeling it. He really liked Panic at the Disco. He loved Ryan Ross a lot.
He's got good taste, yo. Where in the world is Ryan Ross? Ryan Ross, would you please stand up? We want to check on you. How are you doing, hon?
I moved. My girlfriend and I just moved to Chicago
congratulations.
Thank you, from LA. So I was in LA for about 7 years, and so I was kind of emailing with Ryan Ross a bit there, and I think he was in LA, and he'd always be like, "Oh yeah, you should hang out. We've got this project coming out," and then it would be like nothing for like a year and a half. So I don't know what Ryan Ross is doing, but Anyways, I give these really long winding answers because it's really, there's so much that I got to see and do, and a lot of it was because of my contacts with these bands, and I suppose also because I was a pretty good interviewer and I could write, but truly, absolutely, because of my relationship with a lot of these bands, it really opened a lot of doors for me. And leads to stuff like this, where I get to do this now, a decade later.
Who would have thought? You're here with Scardi B on a show called Sugar We're Going In. Like, come
not
on.
Me, yeah. Hey, whatever. You know what else I'd be doing right now? I would just be doom scrolling right now. So this is much better than doom scrolling.
Thank you for doom scrolling your mental timeline with me. I think that's really what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be Fall Out Boy. It wouldn't be hip hop without some fucking beef. Obviously have to touch on the Killers because my take, and I feel like we have very different takes, and that is okay. That's why we are here. Is that when Pete Wentz is taking the high road, you fucked up. Like you are screaming at a wall. Like, because I'm sure, like, I know Pete loves the verbal tussle, because the infamous story is that when he met Travis McCoy, he like sized him up, was like, "Oh, bro, you got tattoos, bro?" And like Travis was like, "Yeah, black people get tattoos." And I'm like, are they gonna fight or kiss? Like,
yeah, you never knew, right?
Hearing that out, I mean, probably both for all of them all the time in that, but this beef was kind of like the first like big like fandom versus fandom, band versus band type thing. How was it kind of knowing both sides and hearing it from both angles and being the person communicating?
I didn't know that this has become this historical battle, or like this like landmark sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think that was like a big beef era. Like there was a lot of beef.
Like I'm saying, that was the hate, like the international like haters ball. Like
it was haters ball. It's like hate.
Yeah. For reviewers, for Pitchfork, for anything, bands.
Yeah. And also there's like this much of me that kind of misses the hate era. Like I'm like, maybe we could bring back some hateration.
No, because then like they'd get canceled for being haters. So cancel culture has just
a fine line now. Yeah, it's really killed off the hating industry. But I mean, honestly, it just sort of came about because, again, the Killers. I bring it all the way back when I was freelancing for Spin Magazine, and I wrote the Bands to Watch piece on Fall Out Boy. Literally, the second one I wrote was about the Killers. So in some way, I was intrinsically linked with these two bands forever. But it just came from just interviewing those bands a ton, and having two guys in Pete and Brandon Flowers who certainly were willing to talk about a lot of the things. And this beef in particular, I think, was just started because they shared an A&R guy, and I think Brandon Flowers was like in his feelings about how he wasn't getting as much time with Rob Stevenson as someone else, which is like, the grounds for a beef is like a little shaky, but just like, again, it would be like, okay, so I did an interview with Brandon Flowers and he talked about the Bravery, talked about Pete Wentz, and I'm like, oh, like, so I was like, there's like some hot scoops right there. So you put them out there, and then like the next day it'd be like, here's Pete's shot back. And so it was great for me as a writer because it was like every day you got a couple of those, and they would just back and forth. Oh, Brendan did an interview with the NME where he talks about Fall Out Boy. I'm like, Pete, here's a link. What do you think? And so,
you were the really shit instigator. I love it.
I was stirring it, not like nonstop.
Of course,
professionally I had to, but
yeah, they were definitely like, they were gonna fight. Pete Wentz would have given Brendan Flowers his new face sooner than later, so it's fine.
That's right. That's right. But yeah, just like they were like, just the most pointless. And you could tell like Pete had these like amazing responses, and like you said, he was kind of. I think even he was sort of like this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Like even for him, he's like, I love beef. Like, love it. And even this is like, bro,
what's cooking?
Like, I don't like this.
I think there was some story that I saw that I think I wrote, but I'm pretty sure where it was literally like, the headline was like, Pete Wentz invites Brendan Flowers to dinner or something, like some shit like that. I was like, that's a story I'm writing on MTV.
No, my favorite was, you know, like all this is happening, but you know, when I'm in his hometown and his friends and family asked to be on the guest list, I get them on. And I was like,
which also is like
I thought that was so like, I mean, I'm biased. Perfect. Like I will literally catch a case for anybody in Fall Out Boy. Like, please, like take all of these hands. But that was such like a gorgeous, like just a very Pete answer.
Exactly. I love that one. But also, like, I unapologetically love the Killers. I think the Killers are a great band. I still love the Killers. So it was like, I was torn. I was like, oh, but that was also a great era of the Killers because it was right when they were doing like that batshit Sam's Town album, and they were like, we got something to prove. And so like every time you talk to them, it would just be like an event. Like
it's the Mormon blood running in them, like something between them and Panic at the Disco. Like I'm sure they were like
coursing through their veins,
like in the same test tube. I don't know how to explain it, but it's same energy, similar energy.
Right. Yeah, it was what a time.
What a time. And I mean, when talking about that, like I wanted to bring up a little bit about like media literacy and like what we were being fed versus what we knew nowadays, where like myself and a Twitter can be like the source of truth. You know, what did it feel like? Right. I know you were like, like I feel like, but I also have to work. Like, what were those inner monologue, like ethic battles like?
Wow. I mean, I think to say that I had like ethical dilemmas about this stuff is to really elevate my job to this kind of level. But I mean, I was like just talking to bands about stuff. I mean, I was really fortunate that, you know, well, I suppose you could fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it. Like, I never really had anyone say anything that was like crazy racist or anything like that. So I never really got into the area where it was like something like,
I have to omit it or they will be like ruined.
Yeah. Right. Like, this is on the record, off the record kind of thing. I mean, I honestly was just like, I guess, you know, when I do these interviews and talk with people who are like, this thing you did or this thing you did, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I did that. At the time was just like heads down. I just wanted to do my stuff. I still to this day, all I want to do is like get my shit done and then like be done. Like I just want to be done with it. So I don't know if I had a ton of ethical dilemmas. I was just kind of like grinding these stories out. And that's also why, you know, when you said something about like, you know, reading my stuff and just like, you know, remembering these, to me, that's incredible. Like, I didn't really think
that was my news. Like, that was my CNN. I was like, James Montgomery just posted, ain't no party like a J-Mon party. We got to read.
Was it the ice cream headaches? Like,
shout out to Ice Cream Headaches Live Journal holding us the fuck down. Oh, love that crew.
So I mean, so basically, what I would just get in the morning, and you know, this also seems like something crazy. It was like from the 1800s, but I would get in and I would check like 10 sites. So I'd be like, oh, absolutepunk.net, Ice Cream Headache. I would just go through these sites to see what was going on that day, and then how could I turn that into a story. So I was just grinding through these things, but also, you know, a real testament to the fact that like a lot of stories, a lot of rumors I would follow up on for stories were stuff that I would see on message boards where it's like so-and-so broke up or so-and-so did that. So fans and just kind of being able to interact with that community on some level really also helped my job and helped me find a lot of, you know, like when I think Brent Wilson, someone left one of the original bassists, Brent Wilson, the original bassist for Panic at the Disco. When he left the band, that was entirely because I saw someone wrote something on a message board somewhere and just following up with that. So, I mean, I was just knocking out these stories. And then, you know, this is honestly before you could even see how stories would do, before this era, before page views. So it was just kind of putting things out into the void. And like the only way you could measure success is, I mean, like shit, I would go on Absolute Punk when they would link to my story and I would just read the comments and like see where the story goes next. And like, so it was this kind of symbiotic relationship with fans and these sites that, you know, informed what I wrote and stuff like that.
I completely.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I didn't even answer your question. But I think the thing is like this era we're in now, on one hand, is fabulous in terms of there are less barriers to getting information out there. The downside is that there's no one checking this information. And I think that is really dangerous well, this podcast took a heavy turn. This is dangerous for democracy. But I mean, there's a lot of, there, we're past the era of gatekeepers. On some level, gatekeeping is obviously not great because, you should, but I wish there were more sort of abilities to vet this information. At least someone who gives it a look before it goes out to the gate, and things
absolutely.
Like that. There's this dude who used to, I won't name his name, but he used to be kind of the head of MTV, middle towards my end of the era. And he ended up going from MTV to Facebook, and he was running Facebook News. And so this was like 2014, 15. So he was in charge of Facebook News, and his whole big thing was he's like, we're going to get rid of the humans, and we're just going to have an algorithm determine what kind of news is served to readers. And it's like, oh, you inadvertently destroyed democracy because that just led to these Russian bots and all these stories in the 2016 election.
Everybody agrees with each other.
Right. And just sort of like this dude who kind of automated news and then also just eliminated all fact-checking, truth, stuff like that from the news, which has really dangerous results. But certainly nothing I did ever rose to the level of like,
it was your Jay-Z article. It ruined it. It was like the butterfly effect. Like you clicked like send and publish, and like everything went downhill from there.
Who knows?
Can you tell me a bit? So obviously you were kind of like the person for Fall Out Boy to write about them, especially during like these really critical times. Obviously, Infinity on High. We had Jay-Z, Babyface. Babyface even like did Thanks for the Memories on Tiny Desk, which was my, I mean, it was Babyface Gate. I got calls. People were texting me. I had missed FaceTimes. I was like doing a morning show at that time, and I was just like, what happened? Is Babyface okay? Please save him. Please save me. Right. But it was just that it was just that important. But then we get into the dark ages where they weren't broken up. It was a hiatus. Right. What was that transition out, and then kind of seeing them as solo artists? I know you specifically also got to see Patrick's very first solo appearance at South by Southwest. What was that period like?
It's, I mean, I suppose it's sort of inevitable in the cycle of any band. Infinity on High is the one, actually, it's the only platinum record plaque I have, is I have an Infinity on High platinum record plaque. It's in my hallway. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I get a picture later.
Sure, I'll send you a picture. Sure, why not? But I mean, it's the only one I ever got. But I think it was really interesting because again, we talked about this band and sort of the influences and kind of like you could see them all kind of coming together to form, the music they made. But with any band, there's always like the leader, and then there's probably someone who also thinks that they're the leader and fancies themselves the leader, and the kind of dynamic between those one or two or more people, really kind of fuels the creative process and things like that. And I think with Fall Out Boy, they just would put out these records. And I think that a combination of just kind of going, being nonstop, being in the center of this kind of the eye of the storm, being tired, having new relationships, wanting to try new things musically. It all kind of started to come to a head where it's like, I don't know, it's, Infinity on High, I think this was Folie à Deux.
Yes, right after 2008. Yep.
So So Folie à Deux was the first time where I actually personally could sort of see this kind of
shift,
the cracks developing But just in terms of, that was the first time where we went to the studio in LA they were going to play some of the songs on that album for us. And it was the first time I ever saw anything with Fall Out Boy where Pete wasn't there. So it was the studio, and it was just like Patrick, and maybe the producer, maybe one of the other guys. But Pete was like not there. And the sense that you got, off camera, we were talking before, they're like, yeah, he's got a lot going on with Ashley and da-da-da. So Patrick really, sat at the mixing board and just played a lot of these songs. It also showed his prowess in terms of production and things like that, and his knowledge, which was great. But you could see that Pete was a bit checked out, probably going through some shit. And Patrick really kind of took the reins and really started driving the band forward. And then, they go on the hiatus, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? My beat is right. But just looking at the bands that they came out with, and I think that, like Patrick is a really, really talented guy, and I think people knew him as the singer of Fall Out Boy, but they didn't know he could write and he could produce and he could, he's an amazing singer. And so when he did like the whole soul punk thing, I think he wanted to show off his, his many sides. And, originally it was just like him on stage, and I think he kind of realized like I need more people because this is a lot to
so
do.
he was like Matt Rubano, Casey Benjamin,
right.
Michael Day, Scooter Warner, come over here.
Yeah. Do you know that Matt Rubano played bass on Lauryn Hill's Everything Is Everything?
No, you're fucking lying to me. Why are you saying? Wait,
he told me that. Yeah. Matt Rubano plays the bass in the studio on Lauryn Hill's Everything Is Everything, because he was like, yeah, dude, I have like 4 platinum plaques from that. He's like, that was it. But he was the studio bassist for that song. I'm like, that song.
Right now.
I'm just like,
thinking about Matt Rubano with Lauryn.
I know. But just on this like iconic record, he's like, I don't know how it happened, but he played bass on Everything Is Everything by Lauryn Hill.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then honestly, it's also wild that, Pete, at the same time, like this whole soul punk, Pete was like, I'm doing Black Cards, which
and now BB Rexa is.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like introduced the world for a brief moment to BB Rexa. But just even in terms of, you saw that like, Black Cards, Pete being Jamaican ancestry and roots in Jamaica, there was that kind of like dub sort of aspect to a lot of what they were doing. And so like you could kind of feel as the bass player, it's kind of natural to kind of gravitate towards that music with that like propulsive, just sort of like and that was what he was doing. Whereas, Patrick loved like, R&B soul, like loved Hall & Oates and all this shit. Like,
he is like he's a Philly soul guy for sure.
And like he was doing. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the story of I think the night that Travi and Patrick met was the night that Ray Charles died. So Patrick was like crying and was like, "I'll meet you later, dude. Like I need a moment." Right. And I was like, I completely believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, and just to see like. And also, it's sort of evident that, I guess Joe and Andy would have like Joe did that like metal thing with like Scardi
the things. Yeah, but like he was also listening to like Eclipse and Ludacris and like a bunch of these rappers. So, but that was his John.
But I just think that you could tell that like everyone was really kind of, most of them. I think that like Hurley was just kind of like, I just want to hang out and do shit with my boys.
I mean, he like Fuck City. Like he was like, I'm good. I've got my working
Compound. Out.
Yeah, baby.
But you could tell that they all wanted to just sort of do their own things, and like while that tension and the baby was kind of grinding in the bands, they really came out with these
being kind of at that age, like I was like, I get it. Like it.
No,
like,
sure.
Patrick was 18 when he recorded "Take This to Your Grave." 19 when it came. Like it's again, Patrick was like 27. I'm like 29 now when he did soul punk, and it's like it is such an era of like I need to try something new. I need to understand who I am and like do this for me right now. But he did something really special where he was like, True Aunt Wave was supposed to have Nicki Minaj, was supposed to have Childish Gambino. Idris Elba is on the album. I believe he did something on Big Hype, and Sid from the internet. Was the engineer for Spotlight.
I didn't know that at all. Yeah.
Omos
That's
Keith
wild.
Of Frank Ocean and Sarah opened for Patrick at Joe's Pub during his stuff. Like he had, Patrick was just like very intentional with like holding space for like Black artists and like being like, if the very least I'm going to do is like have them on here because I'm so inspired by them. Right. And I think like musically, cinematically, Folie à Deux, I bring this up because it just always wrecks my mind. Like there is a Neptune's 4 count in a Fall Out Boy song in Wham's because of Pharrell. So listen to the beginning of the song and it's a Neptune's 4 count right before they start wilding out. Folie à Deux is the best album of all time, hands down. Folie à Deux Supremacy.
Wow.
I don't care what anybody says. They were about to beat the fuck out of each other and it was the best music they've ever made.
Is that a commonly held? Do a lot of people
No, everybody used to hate it, and that's fine. Sure. Y'all can love Take This to Your Grave. Y'all can love that white angsty shit. I loved it, but like when I heard Folie à Deux, like you even hear me now, like it opened up something so crazy in my mind about how I listen to music, and I think it's because Patrick was begrudgingly taking these lyrics and being like, well, fuck you, I'm going absolutely wild bonkers on it to show you that
sure.
like there's so many more layers to what we can be. And because Pete was kind of like, there was like kind of the substitute teacher there. He was like, we're going to watch a movie today.
Right. Yeah. He's at the desk, like heads down. Like,
yeah. But that's always what was so inspiring about like the soul punk era. I was able to, actually like talk to Patrick. Patrick gave me my first big interview, like as a journalist. Like he didn't treat me like this little fucking kid. And he was like, let's sit down. I think it was the last night. It was the last night of his tour at the studio at Webster Hall. So you know how tiny that is.
Yeah.
The next time I saw him was on that stage when Fall Out Boy got back together and did like the comeback show. So it was such a weird shift, just like being in the same room, like two very different eras. But that interview opened so many doors for me. I mean, I used it in like resumes and like college applications that he so desperately wanted me to go to college.
That's right. You got to go. That's amazing. And I think it's also just really, talking about reading articles I wrote or things like that, you never really know. You can never tell what's going to connect with a certain reason. Like the reasons you said that it really connected, that Foley I do really connect with you, it's incredible. Like those would not occur to me. And it's like, that's really also
Lil Wayne. Yes. And Elvis Costello.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, but it's like this, even that where, like just this band really represented what their fans were into, which was sort of everything. You know what I mean? There was so much stuff that they brought into the equation, and like, just admittedly, I didn't hear this new record. I have my Fall Out Boy as I.
It's good. It's a Foley sister for sure. Like it's very cinematic. You hear a lot of Oingo Boingo, like Danny Elfman stuff. Flu Game is like a part 2 to like EXO. Like if EXO was like, I comb the crowd and pick you out. Like this song is like, I guess right now I'm just a face in the crowd. Oh God, would you please kill me now? Like it's awesome. It's like really mature and good. Yeah.
It's also Flu Game, like a great Michael Jordan reference. It is like they bring in this like.
They say also something like somewhere between Picasso and like somewhere between Mike Tyson and Van Gogh. Like these lyrics are so good, and I think they're sampling. I really want to ask them, like, are y'all sampling sneakers? Or maybe like making the guitars sound like sneakers, like on
the court. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it really fucked me up. I have many a question, and also in that Kanye West remix, I really thought that it was Pete's laugh being sampled. Like if you hear the like I was like, that's Pete's cackle. Like people are like, no, like this is the sample. I was like, but if you've heard Pete's laugh, like belly laugh, like that's exactly what it sounds like.
So is that the one where I remember Kanye has like verse and he's like making fun of how tight their pants are and stuff?
Yeah, till their nuts hang all out, boy. Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Right. Like what a great like Kanye mover is like, I'm gonna jump on your song, but I'm gonna be a total fucking dick to you the whole time.
But then he was like, but they're at the #1 spot and I want that too. And then Lil Wayne on the Mega Mix did the same thing, was like, I don't know what the song's about. Like both of them were
He's like, sure, man, yeah, amazing.
And like honestly, one of the best Wayne verses, he goes, I'm more like an armed dealer, literally. Like he goes so crazy, and it's that's just the kind of stuff that really lights me up. Because again, just like I am also an artist manager, so I work in like the R&B, like hip hop scene, and like just bringing all this together just makes so much sense to who I am now.
Sure.
So being able to just bring it all together, being able to storytell and keep this the same way that your articles are online, and you don't know until 10, 15, 20 years later, LOL, I'll get emotional, to keep this, like this podcast is for right now, but it's also for later when people are discovering more about this band and about your specific history with them. This was our vessel to them, and we're so indebted to that. I know it was a job, but we still want to believe in the art. I think that's the important part. Yeah.
It was a fucking great job. I mean, like the older, looking back on now in the places I've worked at since then, I'm like, that was the MTV News thing was like a real. Korean Tom Cruise, Dan Su literally just texted me right now.
Dude, so tell him pull the fuck up. Let's go, yo.
I'll hit him up. Yeah.
Tell him thanks for holding down all those meet and greets that he really had us like going like. God, that's so funny.
I forgot sorry. What was the question? I forget what I was going to say.
About the impact of our stuff, like all these years later.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just think that, like, again, it was that decade of just being at MTV. I was there for 10 years at MTV. And so the amount of things, the people I got to meet, the places I got to go, the things that I got to see like in person, a lot of them were the Fall Out Boy when they're like, oh, we're going to go play, we're going to set a Guinness World Record and play a show on every continent in like a week.
Get stuck in
we got stuck
the
in
fucking stand,
Punta Arenas, Chile, and we were just trapped in this hotel for like a week because they couldn't get down there. And so there's a million. I mean, I got to be on TV. I got to write Pete Wentz's novel, like all this stuff. Like,
we didn't talk about Gray, but yeah.
Well, have you read Gray?
I was no, because it cost about $110 to get a copy, which like go off. But I have read the excerpts, and I was like a touch too young to maybe have read it, but I am very familiar with the her with Pete and with Martin in the story. Yeah.
I also think, the other thing too, it's like, you didn't read it. I don't think I've ever actually read that book either, and I wrote the book, so it's like,
I don't think Pete Wentz has read it all the way either.
No, I'm sure Pete Wentz didn't read it. I know his management did because they made me change the ending of it because it was too sad. But like that was just like I was this writer and I had tried for you. I'm like, oh, I want to get a novel written, and like no publisher would care. But then Pete Wentz is like, hey, this dude's gonna write a novel. They're like, yes. And to Pete's credit, and just his generosity, he was, people ghostwrite novels, people work all the time, but Pete was very upfront about the fact like James's name has to be on the cover of the book, which he didn't have to do. And so just like doing stuff like that for his friends and like was really went above and beyond and helped me out too. So I mean, it was a job, but it was a fucking sweet job, like and I was bummed when MTV News just shut down recently. It's like doing stuff like this, seeing stuff online in terms of people like we're sharing memories and photos, and like there's a million VMA, like being in the Fall Out Boy suite at the VMAs. Just like there's photos of me in the background and just like all this.
What do you remember of that night?
What don't I? I mean, like I don't remember much of it. No, I first of all, that was a fucking awesome VMA. I remember they like gave them their own room and like Babyface is in the room just hanging out. Oh God, who else was in there? I also, the thing I remember about that night is like down the hall, I think the Foo Fighters had a room, and and so one of the dudes from Mastodon, this band, was hanging out with them, and then like after the show went out in Vegas and then got like jumped by some dude in maybe System of a Down or something, and like really fucked, and like the dude got fucked up. He was like got hit. He was like in a coma for like a week. So like I kind of went this dude like I should have done the backstory, but some dude in Mastodon like almost died because he was basically jumped by a dude in another band. Like that was when like Kid Rock was like fighting dudes in the crowd or some shit like that. But I think that was also one of those moments where even Fall Out Boy kind of realized that they were like, holy shit, I can't believe we get to do this. Where they're like, you get this suite at the Palms Hotel, and you can have whoever you want on there, do whatever you want.
The Cypher with all the masks. Travis, Lil Wayne, Brendan Urie, like on the hook.
Well, I mean, like just bringing everyone together of this era, and they're like, they definitely one of those bands that took advantage of all these opportunities because I think they knew they're like, I can't believe this is happening to us. So like, let's do
once they got the Rockefeller chains, anything was possible.
And this is my question, and I actually was talking to Dan too about this like randomly. Did they actually get the Rockefeller chains?
So from my understanding, because there is a interview that's offline, but because Pete Wentz showed me how to lurk on the internet, I found it and I have it with it was the Jensen Clans podcast.
So, sure, that dude,
that dude, and he was basically like, hey, like will your kids get the chains? And he was like, Jay-Z has to come and knight them. Like, I will not give like Bronx the chain. So I'd imagine it's like they have it somewhere. They have to. That was
a big quest of theirs I remember for a hot minute they'd be like,
because they acted like, oh my God, we didn't know. But like, I didn't know that Patrick was over here like with a sweat bead, like waiting to touch this. Like,
yeah, that was a quest of theirs for a hot minute, was to get a Rockefeller chain. I remember that for sure. Their chaining day ceremony, like they had it all planned out, and
what was their chaining day ceremony shirt? Like, what was the fits?
Dude, I don't even remember. I didn't know if it happened or not. So again, that was yet another thing where it was
apparently
like,
someone had reached for a chain, and Jay-Z was like, "No,
truly.
I have to put it on you." And I was like, 100% Pete, 100% Pete.
one of those things you file away where it was like, we're definitely going to do this, and then you never hear about it again. So you're just kind of like, I don't know if it happened or not. But yeah.
I mean, that photo, that whole day of like the Infinity on High being out, and like the 3 shows that needed to happen.
That was crazy. That was crazy.
Like, Patrick also did Gym Class Heroes, like Cupid's Chokehold live there with them. Like, these are all moments so cemented in my mind. And then being able to follow them through your words, through like what MTV was able to give us, I think is such a special era that's why I really wanted to talk to you and just like celebrate you and like thank you for being so authentic.
It's been great, honestly. This is great.
Document it. Yeah. So all I'm asking is that I'm able to rightfully just keep going with the torch and just keep documenting this stuff. Passing it to thank you, James.
It's official now. Yeah.
I'd like to thank Pete Wentz, Patrick Stump, Andy Hurley, and Joe Troman. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is what it's about. So it's like I just wanted to thank you, for being on and sharing these stories and being so incredibly just giving as a artist and yourself and what you do with how you write and everything else you do. So thank you.
You're too kind. This is super fun. I'm happy. Thanks for having me on. Have me back whenever you want. If you got
don't say that, baby. I'm the queen of follow-ups.
If you need someone for a quick expert, I'll jump in. But no, this is great. Like, I really appreciate it. It's great to meet you. And just again, like, this podcast can connect people who I haven't talked to in decades, and just, it's rad to see how, kids, I don't mean to say kids, but younger
kids
fans.
with like a Z. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great to see how, what they've gone out in the world and what they're doing. And you're, testament to that too. And just like the way you are working with artists and things, that's incredible. So I'm happy to hear what you're up to. And this is super fun. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, James. So where can people find you? Where do you want them to find you? Or
I don't want them to find me anywhere now.
Period.
No, I'm an enigma now. I've been out of the game for a minute now, so don't look for me. I'm not out there.
Only look inward, right? Like, if
that's right.
Look inward.
Hey, look at yourselves. Look at yourselves first. Okay, that's what
we're all a little James Montgomery.
That's right. Yeah.
I love it so much. Well, James, thank you so much again for joining us. And then I have to ask, you got to give us a mouth air horn. I finish every show with this, so just give me a bow, 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 bow. That's what the fuck is up. Thank you so much, James. Let's keep in touch.
Sure.
Next up is we're talking about like the VMA suite in 2007, 2008, CFOB. So that might be a cute little time there to talk about it.
I was there.
I was there. James Montgomery. That's the merch. But thank you so much. Have a great day. And then we got to go.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.